Okay, November 5th, 1982. This is Joe Todd. I'm interviewing Carrie Lessly, Ruth Hinton, and Bess Smith Calk. Mrs. Lessly.
Yes, sir.
Where were you born?
Clarksville, Arkansas. Johnson County.
I know it's not proper, but what year were you born? When's your birthday?
Oh, January the 23rd, 1893.
1893.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Hinton.
Mm-hmm.
Where and when were you born?
Well, I was born in Claude, Texas. That's in Armstrong County in northwest Texas in 1900.
And Mrs. Calk.
I was born right out here near Mustang, Oklahoma, June the 27th, 1898.
Mrs. Lessly.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any memories of Clarksville?
Ma'am?
Do you have any memories of Clarksville?
No, I do not. I was there not long ago.
When did you come to Oklahoma?
Oh, I was 4.5 years old. We left the farm in Arkansas the first day of October in 1893. Why do I say that? 1893.
Did you come by covered wagon?
We came, yes, we had 2 wagons. And there was, we had to bring all of our belongings, such as the cows, the chickens, and the horses. Of course, we had mules to pull the wagon. And we had my older brothers. They drove the cattle on horseback. And there were 8 of we children. And the youngest one was my sister Anna Lou. She was baby. And my mother had what was called erysipelas on her leg, and she couldn't walk. And she had this baby, and all we young children. Think of that.
Yeah.
How old were you at this time?
4.5 years old.
4.5.
Yes.
Do you have any memories of the wagon train, what it was like?
Oh, yes, I do.
Tell me about what it was like on the wagon train.
Well, I'll tell you, the best memory I have was we crossed the barges on the Arkansas River.
Where did you cross the river?
Fort Smith.
Fort Smith.
Yes, sir. And I remember being on that barge, and not just, my last brother died 2 years ago, and he and I were talking one day, and he told me that when we were on this barge, they had to take the horses loose from the wagon, and they had the little pens, you see, for the cattle and for the horses and the wagons and all on these barges. So he said that when we were crossing the river, there was a black cat jumped over the barge and swam to the other side of over where we were going to land. And he said it like to have scared him to death. And I couldn't remember this at all, but it scared him so. So he said that when we landed on the other side of the river, well, there stood the black cat. To me, that was one of our real. Then when we came on to Poto, we had to ford that river and it was up. And I remember we children putting our hands out of the wagon like this and playing in the water. And I remember the man that's sitting on the wagon, part of the wagon, to show us, my daddy, how to drive to keep in the right track and fording that river. Then when we came on to Eufaula, we had to stop at a little grocery store and buy something. I don't know what it was. But the man told my father to be careful, that was very dangerous in that part of Oklahoma. Indians are, other people trying to take our cattle. And he said they'll try to take your cattle. And I remember my daddy, he sat up all night long with his Winchester. He had Winchester to, see that the Indians didn't come or rob us, but they came.
Cimarron, the Calk.
And he ran them off. Anyway, they didn't get our stuff. Anything that we had. And my oldest sister, she was, I don't know what age she was. She's 7 years older than me. Well, she'd be about 8 years old, wouldn't she? We had $700. That's all we had. And all of our belongings. And my mother sold the $700 in my sister's underskirt. So that, you see, if they were going to rob us, they wouldn't think about robbing her. And that's the way we carried the money. And what we ate on the, we had 2 Dutch ovens. And my father had to do most of the cooking because my mother had this place on her leg that she couldn't get around very good. And I've often wondered how, we really had to stop and do some laundry. And all these little branches and creeks around, I remember some of the places that our cattle had to have water that night. And I've often wondered, cattle nowadays, you couldn't get them in a place. You'd have to tie them up at night or put them in a fence. But I don't remember how they I guess we must have had some kind of ropes to tie them to keep them all together. Then we landed in Oklahoma. That's November the 1st. It took a month to come from Clarksville to Oklahoma, 9 miles east of Norman.
9 miles east of Norman?
Yes. It's out of Denver, Oklahoma then. I don't know whether it's Denver now or not. So then we had, there's a man, Hickman, his name was Ben Hickman. He met us 7 miles. No, he met us at Seminole to take us on to his place at Denver, Oklahoma. Well, there was about, I'll say, they had about, 8 children, and we had 8 children. And we all lived in the same house for, a week or two, with all our stuff, all our cattle. And so then we had a half dugout and 2 tents. Well, November, you see, was just getting kind of cold. And I remember my sister Eunice had pneumonia while we were living in those tents and the half dugout. We had a fire in the half dugout, but we didn't in the tent. And it sure was cold. And the most experience we had when we lived in the tent, there's a bunch of young men. I'd say young men, they're about 17, 18 years old. Now my brothers, Dee and Ed, they brought those 2 boys, Vincent Reed and Laney Reed, home with them. I suppose we had all kinds of beds, but anyway, those 2 men spent the night. And my mother told my brother, Ed, to get my brother Howard and put him in the bed with these 2 men. But instead of him getting Howard, he got me. Well, I didn't know what had happened. Oh, I tell you, I just felt terrible. I remember someone said, "Is she asleep?" Well, I wasn't asleep, but I sure was playing possum. Well, we moved to, it was out 8 miles east of Norman, and 1 mile south to a farm. And it was, a pretty good house on that. And then my last brother was born. I had 5 brothers then. So, well, then we lived there, I think, 2 years. Well, after we grew older, why we went to, we had Sunday school over at the Denver church schoolhouse. We all had youth schoolhouses. We didn't have churches. So, and my father was a cotton farmer, and we all picked cotton after we moved over on what we call Little River. We had I don't know how many acres of land we had, but anyway, we had 100 acres of cotton. And my father, we had and there's places we could get people to help us pick that cotton. And I remember we got the premium bale. You know, that's quite an honor, especially in those days.
What is a premium bale?
A premium bale is the first bale of cotton that is taken to town in the fall. And I remember my father, he got everybody he could to help him pick that bale of cotton. So, and I remember the premium was $100. Well, that sure did help with we kids buying our things to start the school with.
How old were you when you got the premium bale?
Oh, about 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, still small. And of course, we had schools. We went to the school, and we never did get to go to school till after November the 1st. November the 1st is when we started the school. And we only had 6 months of school at that time. And see, we missed some. Well, then, I guess it was when I become a teenager. Then we went to school. My father, we bought a farm, 240 acres of land. So we children helped pick cotton or do anything we could to make money, and we paid for the farm and built buildings on it. It was virgin soil. It never had been anything done to it at all. So we walked 2.5 miles to school, and we never missed very much because our father was so concerned that we get an education. And I remember when I was 16 years old, I was determined to go to school somewhere. And I was fixing to go to school over at Washington, Oklahoma, another girl and I. But up at Stella, Oklahoma. I don't know if you know where that is or not.
What's the name of it?
Stella.
Stella? No?
Stella, Oklahoma. Why, they had consolidated with all the districts around there to start high school. Well, my brother Howard and my sister Eunice and I, we decided then not for me to go over to Washington, but for us to go to Stella to the consolidated school. Then we went there we went 2 years. And 1 year I taught the elementary school. I had that. And then that's where I become acquainted with my husband, Ernest Lessly. he lived in that neighborhood area. So then, and he was a school teacher too. Well, then that was, oh, I don't know. It was real good. We was studied so hard. We were old enough to know what we were doing, see? And nowadays they started high school so young.
They can't read.
And we did, I remember we studying Latin and algebra. Oh, I love algebra. And my brother, he and I both were, mathematics students, should say. And and my sister, we took Latin and we took English and all other things that was in high school. And the principal of that high school was Professor Rice. He was one of the educators here in Oklahoma, if you remember.
He was Professor
Rice.
Rice?
Rice, R-I-C-E, Rice. And then for the next year, I taught school in that same building. I taught up to the fourth
Now
grade.
this is in Stella?
Yes, that was Stella.
Now what year did you teach?
Huh?
When did you teach? What year?
19 and 12. I was kind of young. I don't think I knew too much, but I taught.
You have any memories of Norman in the early days?
Oh, yes, I went to school in Norman
What was it like?
in 11 and 12. That was more fun. I mean, I left, see, we lived on a farm, and I had the best time going to school up there.
Now, did you go to the university there?
No, I went to it was called normal school, but I went to we walked to the university. I lived about, I guess a mile and a half from the university.
So you lived in Norman then?
No, I was boarding. I was rooming with some people. And I did that for two summers. And that's how come it's to school.
Were the streets in Norman bricked at that time?
Yes, and mud. Some of them were paved and some of them were.
How big was Norman?
Norman was very small at that time. Very small. But they still had the university. And the university only had, when we came, it only had one building, university did. And now, how many do they have? I wonder.
Lots of them. I went down there for several years.
Oh, you did?
Yes, ma'am.
So.
Okay, Mrs. Hinton. When did you come to Oklahoma?
1914.
1914.
See, my dad homesteaded in New Mexico when I was 7, and it took us 3 days to go from Claude, Texas, where he had homesteaded and covered wagon. Just my dad and mother and my brother and I. My brother's 4 years younger than I was. So we lived there, pardon me, but I have a cold.
Oh, that's fine.
Until 1914, when Dad sold his half-section land for $640. So he decided it was time to come to Oklahoma because he had a lot of relatives here. So he chartered a car from Indy, New Mexico to Oklahoma City and brought what furniture we had and the cattle, 3 or 4 or 5 and our horses. And of course, I suppose our wagon and all the same. But my brother and I, we came on the Rock Island from Indy, New Mexico to Oklahoma City. And but Dad had gone on to Purcell, and he rented a small farm west of Purcell. It was from an Indian. The Indian's name was Goins. And we lived there 1 year, and my brother and I went to school about 1.5 miles south of where we lived. That was west of Purcell. And that's where I met my husband. But he was from Texas, but he was John D. Hinton, the giant Hill.
Did you live near Lexington?
Well, at one time we lived, I had an aunt named Thompson that lived in Lexington. But then after we were married, my husband's dad decided we should go to Arkansas and look for land, but we didn't find any. So we came back and they rented this farm east of Lexington. And we lived there that 1 year, part of the year, and World War One started, and my husband decided he would enlist. So he volunteered for the Coast Guard and was sent to San Diego, California. And I had a lot of canned fruit and things that we packed up and sent to my parents. They lived at Curtis, Oklahoma. And anyway, just after he went to San Diego, the aircraft was, I'm pretty called organized or what. Anyway, he volunteered for the aircraft, and he just trained there 6 months and was sent to France. And of course, there's World War One. And anyway, one of the experience they had, they didn't have much way to communicate then. Their company was behind the German lines. And that's when the Germans had that big gun that they called the Big Bertha. But it shot so high and so far it went over their company. So they lived on salmon for 3 days. He didn't care for salmon. But anyway, when he came back, I was at my parents at Curtis, Oklahoma then, and he went to work in the depot there, the Santa Fe depot, to learn to be an apprentice operator. But he had had some gas when he was in France, and he saw that he couldn't work inside. So the civil service had an examination for people for rural carriers, and he passed the examination, and he was assigned to an office at Husky, Oklahoma. That was about 20 or 30 miles north of Moreland. And he lived there 2 years, and that inland office was closed, and we went to Freedom, Oklahoma. And he carried the mail out of there for 46 years, rural carrier. Mm-hmm. And I won't tell all about how I went to school because it was here and there. But I was editor and publisher of a newspaper there for 40-some years, the Freedom Call. Mm-hmm. And but our first baby was John D. Jr. We lost him when he was 7 months old. Then we had 2 daughters, Mrs. James Selman of Woodford, and Miss John Belmer, Belmear, of Portales, New Mexico. But I've lived in Oklahoma all those years since then. Our children are all born in Oklahoma.
Do you have any memories of Claude?
Oh, yes.
What was Claude like?
Well, it was a very small town, and my grandparents, my mother's parents, lived 6 miles south of Claude. And I remember then we all believed in Santa Claus and all those things, and what a good time we had. My mother's parents, their name was Slay, S-L-A-Y. They were Pennsylvania Dutch, and they came from somewhere northeast. And anyway, I heard them tell that on the way, I don't know how many children they had, but they had a little baby that got sick, and of course it passed away. But they buried it in the corner of someone's pasture. And then they drove the wagons over the grave, so the Indians thought they might find it. But anyway, they never knew where that little baby was born. But we lived at Claude until I was 6, and of course went to New Mexico. And then when I was 14, we came to Oklahoma. When we lived in New Mexico, it was very wild, we might say. And we went to school and had church all in the same little building. Now,
what was the name of the town in New Mexico?
This was Allen, A-L-L-E-N. But it was an inland town. It was 13 miles south of Indy, E-N-D-E-E. But anyway, when we left Indy, and we had chartered the car and brought our horses and our belongings to Oklahoma City. Then we went to Purcell and rented that farm east of Purcell. We lived there a year, and then we went to Hiawassee. Of course, that was named the Kiowa Indians, and we lived just south of the Cheyenne and Arapaho Indian Reservation. And At that time, the government had, I don't know, kind of allotments they gave the Indians, but there's an Indian school about a mile and a half southwest of where we live. And they got their allotments or whatever, the government paid, and they would go by our house in, they called them hacks, but, they had some mules or horses too, and white tops on. They would go over there and camp 2 or 3 days, and all the hoopla they'd have while they were over there.
Now these were Cheyenne and Arapaho?
That was Kiowas. They lived south of the Cheyenne and Arapaho reservation. Mm-hmm. But that's all we knew about then.
Did you ever have any contact with the Cheyennes or the Arapaho?
No, we just knew that was a reservation. But those, well, I don't know whether they were ones that came there. They was just, seemed to me like hundreds of them went over there to school to get their allotment. And anyway, the government had built nice houses for them. Well, the Indians pitched their teepee and lived in the backyard with teepee. But they were all real peaceable and nice. We never were afraid of them.
What was your first impression of Oklahoma City when you first saw it?
Well, it was certainly I thought it was as big as all over the world almost. Where we lived, there just wasn't any cities in New Mexico.
How big was Oklahoma City at the time?
Well, now that was in 1914. I just have to guess at it. It didn't seem like it was too large. And we went to Purcell, and it was a very small town.
Okay. Mrs. Calk?
Oh, I wanted her to tell about this this newspaper in
Freedom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was the editor publisher of the Freedom Call for 47 years.
This was your husband?
That was mine. He was a real carrier. He couldn't help me on this.
Oh, you were the publisher?
Yes, I got the copy and the advertising. We got advertising from Alva, Woodward, and Coldwater, Kansas.
So you were a publisher for 46 years?
Yes, the Freedom Call. We still have it there, but then we had to sell it when my husband's health broke and moved to Woodward, so we didn't get a doctor.
Now, when did you move to Woodward?
Well, let's see, this is 82. It was in 78 or 9.
Were you anywhere near Woodward when that tornado hit in 47?
Well, we lived at Freedom. That's northeast of Woodward. And that tornado started at White Deer, Texas.
Right.
Came down through Oklahoma. And, of course, Woodward was the worst torn up, I think. But the night of the tornado, my 2 daughters and I were in church in Freedom, and it rained all night. I thought, well, we'll never get home, but it was on Wednesday night. And finally, it quit raining, and then we drive our car at different times, up into the church so we go home. So when we got home, I had 2 little grandchildren living with us, and of all things, my husband was taking a bath. One of those kids, one's in the front bedroom, one in the back bedroom. But we didn't know anything about the Woodward tornado until the next morning. Oh, we had breakfast, and our neighbor, he was Ray Nixon across the street from us, came over, and I thought, well, who's ringing our doorbell this early? And when I opened the door, he said, Miss Hinton, did you know Woodward had a tornado, and over 100 people were killed, and said, I have to get up there quick because I have a lot of relatives here. But anyway, he didn't do any damage on that huge rain at Freedom. But anyway, I had a daughter in school at Alva, going to college, and it was a new college, and there's just one girl's dorm, and they had a big rumpus room that wasn't finished. So that night, quick as I could get there, ambulance after ambulance brought wounded people to Alva, and of course that didn't have a very large hospital, and pretty soon someone came and asked the girl, said, do you have a blanket or something you can donate? And because they just had to lay those people on the floor, and they had to have something to cover. So my daughter had a gray wool blanket that her dad had brought when he came home in the Army. So she donated that. And anyway, I don't know too much about those people, this what happened, but I do know there was over 100 people that lost their lives. And anyway, we lost our first baby, was buried at Moreland, and just east of his grave there was 3 graves, a man and his wife and a little baby that said they were victims of the Woodward tornado. And anyway, that's about all I know, I guess, except my husband was ill a long time and passed away. But he was a veteran in World War One, and not even very many wives left in World War One veterans anymore.
I know. Mrs. Calk, you were born near Mustang, 1898.
Well, I think it was about 3.5 miles from Mustang.
Okay.
I don't remember much when we lived there. Of course, wasn't there very long. I had 2 sisters. I'm a twin. My oldest sister, we were identical twins, but we moved to a farm near Taloga, Oklahoma, and had a farm there. And we went to school out in the country. We walked 3 miles, and when it was real stormy, why, Daddy would take us. I remember riding a horse one time. There was 2 of us, and I do remember the first day I went to school was a man teacher, and I was scared to death because I hadn't been only on a farm. And I do remember the first day I went to school was a man teacher, and I was scared to death because I hadn't been only on a farm. And so I wanted to go back home when I got there. And this man teacher said, if you do anything at all, there's a loaf, door to a loaf that you just raised it up, and he said, I'll just stick you up there and close that, and it would even be dark, you know.
This is up in the attic?
Yeah, up in the attic. And, well, I wasn't going back to school. So Daddy had to take me 2 mornings. So anyway, why, I'll never forget that. I was never as scared in my life.
How old were you?
Well, I guess I was 6 years old.
And this is in Taloga?
Yeah, out in the country.
What was the teacher's name?
His last name was Jones. Now, I have forgotten his first name. Jim or John or...
Were your parents farmers?
Yeah.
What'd they farm? What'd they raise?
He raised sweet potatoes. He was known as Sweet Potato Smith all over western Oklahoma.
Sweet Potato Smith of Taloga, Oklahoma?
Yeah. And I remember going with Daddy to Sealing, Oklahoma, with a load of sweet potatoes to sell, of course. And then it was such a thrill to stay in the wagon yard. And, I had something to talk about then, you know.
And what's the wagon yard?
Well, that's where the farmers would take different products and sell them
Kind of like a farmer's market?
Yeah, nowadays. So, I don't remember too much about I know that when we moved from Taloga to Clinton, Oklahoma, that's my hometown, and that's where I went to school, the grades, and high school. And my last year of high school, I had typhoid fever, and I missed quite a bit. Then I couldn't graduate with the high school class that I started with. So I took a business course in my last year of high school, and then I graduated, but I didn't get a diploma. But I took this business course, and then my sister and I came to Oklahoma City and went to work for the Western Union, and I didn't like that. And then I was reading an ad, and I saw where an insurance company needed help filing and typing and all. So I went to the Mid-Continent Life Insurance Company. It was down on West Main then, and that was 1921. Then I was married last 1921, and lived here, and had the one son, and he's in Tulsa. So
What's his name?
James Calk. Well, I lost my husband in 1961. So that's about my life.
Okay, when did you first come to Oklahoma City? What year?
1920, I believe.
1920. Okay, Mrs. Lessly.
Yes.
Do you remember the Spanish-American War at all? That was 1898, 1899.
Well, very little, if any.
Okay. Did do you three ladies remember anything about the men going down to chase Pancho Villa?
I do.
You did.
When we lived in New Mexico, when Bill they were raiding New Mexico.
Columbus, New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
What was your reaction?
Well, see, people couldn't make a very good living out there, and at different times the men would go off to work. And I know we were reading in the paper about these raids that were making into New Mexico, and I told Mama, I said, well, just so Dad would be at home, I wouldn't be afraid. And I remember she said, well, your Dad wouldn't be able to do very much with them, these raiders, but they never did come that far. But there is something I'd like to add to this newspaper story.
Go ahead.
When the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor, we were having a district newspaper meeting in Freedom. And I couldn't even begin to tell how many newspapers were there. But there was a Navy admiral that made the talk. His idea, they were trying to get recruits for the Navy, because our Navy was at Pearl Harbor. And his wife, they had so then it was not too much television, not if any, but they had a radio in their car, and she was listening, because people were expecting something to happen. But anyway, my husband, we just finished lunch, and he kept going out. This meeting was in a schoolhouse auditorium, and I wondered, what is he going out there for? But he came back in just after we finished lunch and said, well, I have news for you. I want you to listen. But it isn't good news. The Japs had bombed Pearl Harbor. Well, they were supposed, now, Vern Sanford was the state president of Oklahoma Crystal Association. And we were supposed to
Wait a minute. Mrs. Calk,
Yes,
what did you do during World War One?
I was working, I think. Now, my husband was in World War One, but I didn't know him then. And then I worked in the war plant when Pearl Harbor was hit.
Oh, you worked in the war plant.
2.5 years.
Where was the war
Out
plant?
here, Douglas.
Douglas, what did you do?
I worked in a tool shed.
What did you do? Just
Handed out, gave, everything was numbered and named, of course, and I issued these tools.
did the men that worked out there, or the
Right.
women, or
Right.
Let's see. In the Dust Bowl. What's your recollection of the Dust Bowl and the dust storm?
Well, I don't remember too much. Of course, it hurt a lot of people, but I believe we were still, seemed like we had a little piece of land. Anyway, I don't remember. I know that the storm, the dust was so bad that you couldn't hardly see to drive a block, more than a block or two.
How'd you keep it out of your home?
We didn't. Just worked all the time.
We'd wake up one morning and one color dust would be over the yard, and maybe a day or two later be a different color dust.
Right.
Dust was terrible. Even now, down here in Oklahoma.
I didn't hear you.
I said the dust was awful down here even in Oklahoma.
Oh, yes.
Mrs. Lessly, what did you do during World War One?
Well, I did a lot of things for the soldier boys, like knitting, making sweaters, and I lived on a farm. My husband and I had one child, and I met a nurse. Her name was Miss Morrison. Here, she lived here in Oklahoma City, and we lived out east of Moore. My husband and I.
East of Moore?
Yeah, east of Moore. And I met this nurse in my buggy. I had a buggy and a horse, and took her to, we met at one another's home, and she gave us lessons how to take care of people, and she taught us how to do so many things. And then we knit sweaters and socks, and made different things for the soldier boys. And we took that, I guess it was 6 months we worked on it.
Besides the...
And I received the honor for working the most hours.
Good. Besides the sweaters and the socks, what else did you make for the soldiers?
Let's see. Well, I've just forgotten that.
Did you do this at home?
Huh?
Did you do this knitting at home?
Yes, and at one another's house, we meet for all day work, because then maybe we'd meet a certain day in the week to work for it. Well, and we did some kind of stuff on the machine, but I've forgotten what it was. I think that was, we made different things like ram sacks for them to put their things in.
Where were you living at this time during World War One?
Out east of Moore.
That's right, you meant, I'm sorry.
On the farm.
During the Dust Bowl, where'd you live? In the lake?
In Moore?
In Moore.
Yes.
What was Moore like during the Dust Bowl?
Oh, it's very small. Just very small. That was That was after, well, when I first married.
Yep.
We lived in Moore. Now, we were living in Moore till we moved out on a farm. We bought a farm.
In the 20s,
In what?
in the 1920s,
Yes.
what kind of dresses did you wear?
Well, I'll tell you.
Were you a flapper?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you so. I remember. They had, well, what were those skirts called that had, where they were so narrow, you know,
Hobble
Hobble skirts?
That's what they called them, hobble skirts.
Yeah. I remember my husband and I, it was on Christmas, we had this one daughter, Jerona, and we decided we were going to, down to New Alva on the train to see his parents for Christmas. And we had to walk from the interurban station down to the Katy Railroad to get the to get the train to New Orleans. And I was walking and I had this little skirt. I don't know if it was. Oh, and he had a baby, and there's a man with us, his friend, and it was raining. Oh, it was, and how, that's about a mile down there, isn't it?
What kind of shoes did you wear?
Oh, button shoes, high top,
High heels.
So when the 20s came along, did you get a dress above the knee?
Skirt.
Well, they weren't too short.
Oh, I did. I remember.
Did you have, Mrs. Calk, you had a dress above the knee? Were you a flapper?
Sure.
Oh, what's a flapper? What
Well,
do the
now,
flappers
she's
do?
younger than I am.
Oh, not much.
What does the flapper do?
Oh, do the Charleston and just kind of what our parents said, kind of wild.
Did you Marcel your hair?
Oh, sure. I didn't miss anything.
How many boyfriends did you have then?
Oh, I'm not telling.
Mrs. Hinton, were you a flapper?
No,
No.
my dad wouldn't let me be. I was already married though.
Oh, well. You couldn't have boyfriends then.
But I remember those hollow skirts, and when I had my hair cut,
That's a lot of fun.
I went to the barber shop and had my hair cut off, and I was home cooking lunch when my husband got home, and he looked at me so funny, and I thought, well, now what's he going to say? But anyway, he looked at me and he said, well, hello, Oliphant. I thought, well, what in the world's the matter with him? But my hair, I guess, was some kind of color. I don't know what, but he wasn't very impressed.
He was what?
He wasn't very impressed with me having my hair cut.
Okay, with Mrs. Lessly, what were your parents' names?
Oliphant, Oliphan't, Oliphant.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Anderson,
And where were they from?
Tennessee,
Tennessee. Both of them?
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Mrs. Hinton, what were your parents' names?
My mother was Mrs. Cora Slay Walker, just S-L-A-Y. My dad was Thomas Smith Walker. His father was a Methodist circuit rider, if you know what that is. He said he didn't know a chicken ever had but one piece of leg until he grew up, because the preachers always came to eat and always got the good parts of the chicken.
Where were your parents?
Can we do it again?
Okay, Mrs. Calk, who were your parents? What were their names?
Alva Dewey Smith.
And where was he from?
I think he was born in Illinois.
And who was your mother?
And mother, Elzira.
Will you be out in a few minutes, Carrie?
Yeah.
She'll be out in a few minutes. Okay, I'll wait out here for her. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was the last one?
Who was your mother? Where was she from?
Missouri. And
What was her name?
Elzira.
What was her last name?
Bodine.
Bodine. Okay. Mrs. Hinton, who were your parents?
Well, my mother was Cora Slade Walker, and my dad, of course, I said, was Thomas Smith Walker.
And where were they from?
They're from Texas.
Texas. What part of Texas?
Well, my dad was born in Montague County, that's northeast of Dallas. Of course, his dad was a Methodist circuit rider and preacher in one thing and another. But originally, the Hintons were from Georgia, Atlanta. And when my husband and I married, he was corresponding with a cousin in Atlanta, Georgia. But we never did learn much about him.
Where was your mother from?
My mother was born in Texas, in Montague County, not too far from Dallas.
Mrs. Lessly, who were your parents?
My father was David Oliphant.
And where was he
He was
from?
born in Greenville, Tennessee. And my mother was Sarah Jane Anderson. And she was born in Rome, Georgia.
From Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mrs. Calk, what did you do during World War II? You were? Oh, I think I've got it.
Yeah.
I did. I worked out. It was Douglas then, which is Tinkerville now.
Okay, and you handed out tools to all the workers?
Right.
Okay.
I was in one of them, of course. There was dozens of them.
Mrs. Lessly? Your husband worked for Meadowgold Milk Company?
Yes, sir.
And the Depression didn't bother you?
No.
Not at all.
Oh, it sure did.
You were lucky.
Yes, I think so. My children always, well, they enjoyed, you know, they said that they were like, just fairies. They didn't bother them at all.
And like you said, people had to have milk, so...
Yeah, that's why I guess stayed on top. We didn't bother us.
Mrs. Hinton, what did you do during the Depression?
Well, we lived at Freedom, of course, as dust came in, just like I did a lot of Oklahoma. But anyway, I didn't get my Pearl Harbors for a bit, not so much that. But during World War II, we sent the Freedom Call to all the boys' names we could get in the service. We had over 100, I forget how many names on our list. We didn't charge anything for it.
This is World War II?
Mm-hmm. And then one Christmas, we, for the paper, we had their parents or relatives to we put a little piece of paper greeting the boys, and we bought brown envelopes, airmail stamps, and mailed those Christmas issues to all the boys' names we had in the service.
Mrs. Lessly, what did you do during World War II?
We made a victory garden, and we worked real hard at it. My oldest daughter and I did. We would have to drive 23 miles to this garden, and we worked at it. So, and I had two boys in the service. Charles was in the Air Force. He flew 32 missions over Germany. And not long ago, he went back to England. He said if he ever went back to England, he wanted to see where he was stationed. And he and his wife had to take a train from London out to Norfolk and to see where he was stationed and what he went through with. And he didn't get all that he wanted to see and didn't get to, so he went back the next day. And James was an MP here in Oklahoma. And he was stationed several places over the United States before he came home. And I worked and did so many things. I didn't work away from home, but I worked at home. And I took in roomers, to have and to help out during the war. So,
did you can all the vegetables in the garden? What did you do with all
I canned
this?
them and froze them. We had a freezer that was down on May Avenue, and we froze chickens and we froze all vegetables, what we didn't can.
Were you three ladies for votes for women back in the 20s?
Now what?
Were you for votes for women? Were you a suffragette?
Yes, it was. I thought I had the right to vote.
And my first president was Woodrow Wilson. I voted for him.
You voted for
So did
yes.
My first
I
one.
guess I did too.
So you all three were,
I was a Democrat.
you were
I
Democrats.
was still a Democrat. I voted for two Republicans, Nixon and Reagan.
So you all three were for votes for women.
Oh, yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
And I voted, I don't think I've missed a vote since.
Well, I didn't when I was able to get to the polls.
Me too. It
Well,
was
do you all-
privilege.
Do you all three have any comments you want to make about your childhood or?
Well, the
Oklahoma?
thing we did was when we were, we always had entertainments at the schoolhouse.
Yes, so did we.
And we'd all go in wagon with a straw in it with a comforter, and we'd all sit in the back of the wagon. And that's the way we all went together.
What kind of games did you play? as
We
children?
played Skip to Maloo, we played Snap.
Okay, how do you play Skip to Maloo?
Skip to Maloo, you have partners, and you get in a circle, and you
Skip to Maloo,
skip
my
them,
darling.
and then maybe she would come over and get me, and we'd dance around and sing Skip to Maloo, my darling, gone again. See, Skip to Maloo. Somebody'd take her away from me, or I'd take somebody. They'd take somebody away from me, and then we'd say, gone again, Skip to Maloo, gone again, Skip to Maloo, gone again, Skip to Maloo, my darling.
And you played,
We used to play drop the handkerchief with.
Yes.
I don't know what happened when you dropped the handkerchief, but somebody had to chase somebody.
now how do you play Snap?
I play Snap? What? Well, you'd snap somebody like that, and they had to catch you.
They had to chase you around somebody.
Yes.
I don't tell you.
Now what was did they have to catch you or you have to keep from being caught?
Yes. Run, keep them going. It was fun. And then nothing. Pass the dollar. Now that was pretty close. We take a silver dollar, and there's 3 boys and 3 girls would kneel down, and one would have the dollar in the mouth, and they'd have to pass it to your mouth. You see, like that, and not drop it. If you dropped it, well, then you would have to do it over.
And you did do that.
And that was terrible to get that close to a boy. You didn't get that close to a boy those days.
What other games did you play?
What other games? Just different games. What other games could? Let's see. Dog. Slap in and slap out.
Slap in, slap out.
Slap in and slap out.
What's that?
How to do that.
Well, maybe all the boys would leave the room, and the girls would be seated around. And when each one would say who they wanted to stand behind their chair, and if it's all right, they were not slapped out. See? But if they were in the wrong place, why, they were slapped out.
How do you know if you're in the right place or wrong place?
Well, you see, when time comes, why, what he would say is that you had somebody else to stand behind you. Why, you didn't want this guy that's standing behind you. And you'd slap him out from someplace else.
Okay.
This,
About the youngest game that I used to, I remember it was London Bridge is falling down,
oh, yes.
and well, of course, drop the handkerchief. But we had fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I never dropped a handkerchief. You drop a handkerchief behind somebody and they had to chase you around the ring, try to catch it.
And music
And I
and
don't know what
chair.
happened.
And if you caught them, they had to get in the middle, or they had to run. It's been so long.
Ever play spin the bottle?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Did the boy have to kiss you then?
Spin the plate.
No, we
Pan or
didn't.
something.
We did other things.
What'd you do?
Oh, they run up and they'd spin a pan for some reason. I don't even remember what.
If the bottle pointed towards her, she had to
Yeah.
stand.
Oh dear. I think I've forgotten a few things.
And we used to have singing. That was our entertainment on Sunday afternoon and night.
You have ice cream social?
Yes, everybody, yes. We would do that.
Well, I think we have a good interview, I think.
It was a good many years ago to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And
Banding, is that the church?
mhm.
Is that during the war?
We didn't talk about our churches, did we?
You know, the Red Cross, we met regular.
I voted for the million bandages during World War One for Woodman.
Well, how would you fold bandages? How'd you do it?
Oh, I don't even remember.
Oh, make them, we took sheets, you know, that was worn, and we tore those in a certain
Long
length.
strips.
That's
And
a cancer dressing?
cancer bandages,
Well, my church still does it.
they do.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Well, I
Come on.
haven't for a long
No,
time. I've done it off and on all these years. But,
How do you all feel about ERA?
Equal rights.
Well, I think
Don't
it's
it?
one-sided.
So,
I don't think it's fair for a lot
I could
a lot
never
of things.
vote for it.
I do think women ought to get more for their work. But there's just
Well,
so
I
many
think
things.
I think they do.
I think they do too. I
Yeah.
haven't worked for
You
them
think they
long
give
time.
enough?
Yes, I do.
Well, I think, well, now some of it they do and some of it they don't.
Well, I think that a lot of them, in fact, I knew a woman that left her family, had to hire someone to stay with her kids, and so she could go to the war plant, and she finally got a divorce because she met somebody else. She thought she liked better. So, I'm not for it.
I have a granddaughter from Tulsa that lobbies for the OEA.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
She's still doing some.
Well,